Over the past 5 to 7 years, I've been immensely critical of sim racing esports, and it's not because I'm jealous that I personally can't qualify for these events. In the video I uploaded yesterday, I demonstrated that I can hang with some pretty tough customers. But rather, I've always been really concerned regarding what happens if the sim racing industry and hobby puts all their eggs into the esports basket and things don't pan out. If people lose interest in these sim racing esports events because there's not many people watching to begin with, or sponsors start jumping ship because they discover that, hey, there's not as many eyes on these events as you told us there'd be, or the drivers themselves lose interest, that's a serious amount of money to burn on holding these competitions with no return on investment, and it's a mammoth amount of development time and resources spent on features or functionality, or even designing entire games around what ends up being a fad. Now, I've taken a lot of shit over the years, including from a former employer who politely asked me not to talk about this stuff in public anymore. So, as you can imagine, I felt extremely vindicated to discover this article by Adam Ishmael today over at Jalopnik, explaining how the entire Gran Turismo esports scene was both a waste of time for the competitors as well as a money pit for Sony and Polyphony. And all the people who have no-lifed Gran Turismo over the years, thinking esports was their shot out of the suburbs, have walked away with literally nothing and left the game altogether. I mean, just read this tagline. Lavish production and FIA backing convinced players that GT was a springboard to a motorsports or esports career. Years later, that dream has vanished. We are going on a ride today. So I'm going to show you the major pieces of info that were revealed in this article. But before each one, I'm going to show you guys that, hey, like, I was talking about this for a while, and more people probably should have taken me a bit seriously. So, in my video a few days back on iRacing addiction and overall sim racing addiction, I mentioned that not everyone's going to get themselves into a position like Jimmy Broadbent or Super GT or Jarno Opmeer. There are a ton of people who have put in crazy amounts of hours into these games and just have nothing to show for it. This goes all the way to the top of the food chain. The Gran Turismo esports guys also had nothing to show for it. They made no money from winning these races or winning these championships. They would be given gifts from Sony or Polyphony, like a Thrustmaster TGT wheel, or flown out to some of the on-site locations for said tournaments, but they didn't actually make any money doing this, so they really have nothing to show for it, beyond a vacation they could have saved up for and went on with their girlfriend by working a normal job. Years wasted on Gran Turismo for nothing. The most they got was random swag from Gran Turismo partners or a Thrustmaster TGT wheel so they could keep binging on Gran Turismo. So we're only just getting into this article, and Gran Turismo, which is one of the biggest racing game franchises ever, is just wasting everybody's time. Now, a little over a year ago, I uploaded this extremely cringy 20-minute odyssey explaining that a lot of developers in the sim racing industry do not act very nice behind the scenes. Some of them are very strange and creepy and controlling, and the reason the stories don't blow up is because A, sim racing is just not a very big industry at the end of the day, and B, a lot of the sim racing outlets do not want to touch these stories. Gran Turismo has now entered the picture. Gran Turismo had a dress code for their esports competitions and forced the esports competitors to only wear Gran Turismo branded stuff that they personally supplied, preventing any of these drivers from having any sort of sponsorship at all, which is the opposite of how any type of racing works. This is the same company that sponsors the Nürburgring 24 Hours every year, and there's a Gran Turismo windshield banner that's mandated on every single car. But when you're in their competition, they don't want you to have any sponsors. This makes sense. Now, moving on to the overall time sink required. A bunch of years back, I uploaded a video that got a decent number of views called The Reality of Competitive Sim Racing. And in this video, I argued that the insane amount of grinding required to reach the highest of highest levels in the world of sim racing esports basically turns the game into Guitar Hero, and necessitates a level of practice that takes the fun out of these games. I've also shown the difference between a normal, decent qualifying lap that most people would be satisfied with versus an esports tryhard lap where I try to get every single corner pixel perfect, and just how much time is shaved off your PB by doing so, which necessitates and even justifies this insane level of commitment. And of course, a few weeks back, I talked about at length in my iRacing and sim racing addiction video that I knew a lot of people who were just constantly on the game, to the point where I was noticing more and more people I ran into on these games never mentioned having a girlfriend, a job, or even a car. The Jalopnik article on Gran Turismo states that, yeah, this was a pretty serious problem. 6 of the 7 former competitors that were interviewed for this article admitted they actually got out of the Gran Turismo esports scene because it was literally eating up all their free time and preventing them from seeing their friends or families. Vincent Rigaud in particular, the 2018 Manufacturer Series champion, says he estimates he was spending 50 hours a week just grinding out Gran Turismo, which a normal work week in North America is 40 hours. And they were doing all of this for free. They weren't even being paid for it. They were doing this in the hope that maybe one day they got paid. This is fucked up. Moving on to the PR side of things, a couple of years back I uploaded this really amazing compilation of Twitch clips that featured professional race car drivers who wrote glowing reviews about iRacing on their testimonials page, raging at how awful the game was when they actually had to sit down and play it, and basically wanting nothing to do with it, which kind of fucks up their entire marketing campaign. So this happened with Gran Turismo as well. Throughout Gran Turismo 7, which literally just came out a few months ago, the avatars and likenesses of former esports competitors and champions appear throughout the game as either pop-up hints throughout the various menus or as AI drivers that you race against offline. Most of these guys who are slinging these fake testimonials inside the game have actually walked away from the game entirely. They fed Jalopnik all the info so they could write this article about how shitty the esports scene in Gran Turismo is, and they also didn't get paid for this either. So this game's now loaded with these really weird testimonials from real people who don't really want to be slinging how great Gran Turismo is, because in reality they kind of fucked them over. And a group of them went to the media about it because things were so bad. Like, this entire thing is just comical. On to the very last point. This one got me in a bit of trouble with my former overlords. So I made a video a couple of years back that I had to then delete and then re-upload years later that said, nobody's watching and nobody cares, sim racing esports are dying. And you know, it's a pretty simple argument. The view counts speak for themselves, nobody on the forums is talking about sim racing esports, and developers, organizers, and sponsors are running these events in a void with no return on investment at all. A Polyphony Digital rep confirmed this to one of the drivers, basically saying that, like, they don't even know why they continue to put on these events because they just lose ass loads of money, and the drivers will get paid when we do, meaning the event staff. This is pretty incredible, and I'll leave you guys with this question. If Gran Turismo can't figure out how to make this work, what hope does that leave the rest of sim racing? And what other disasters in the sim racing esports scene are we sooner than later going to hear about?